I have to say now, which means welcome and goodbye. But because this morning we do have a little bit of a Pacific morning going on, with Kim speaking earlier to us from Auckland in New Zealand, and now we're going to move over to Hawaii. Is it the Big Island that you're on?
No, I live on Oahu, which is the most populated island.
Yeah. Okay, and so we're moving to Oahu with Amy. Now, Amy, just before I introduce you, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping, and then I'll introduce you more formally. So just a little bit of housekeeping, everyone. This is our final big idea session. Final big idea session, and with Amy, there are 2 more live sessions that you can participate in. One will be the debrief and closing, which will happen on Friday evening in Australia. It's just an opportunity for all of us to get together, reflect. We were really keen to get feedback from you on what worked, what didn't, and how we can improve this conference. We have heard from many of you some kind words about, enjoying a conference specifically around learning experience, and that's what we wanted as well, and we wanted to make it as accessible as possible. So we're very keen to hear from people how they found it, and how we might reframe it and improve on it for another iteration. So please do come along. Mark, Spiros, and myself are very keen to hear from you, and we'll do a little bit of a formal closing as well. And the other live session that's still coming up is a V Connecting session that is being organized by the V Connecting people, including Maha and Wendy, who've been participating so actively this week. They've got some of our speakers coming back in, Yishai, Jess, I think Amy, you won't be joining us for that, but Yishai and Jess, and I think maybe Indy will pop back in as well. So that'll be really great, and it will be done via Google Hangouts, so it'll be accessible more widely. So if you have some colleagues or friends in your network who would be keen to kind of hear how this event was, do direct them towards that V Connecting session, because it will be publicly open and it will be live streamed. The other thing is that there are some new Open Studio projects on. Next year, we've decided we're going to, on our next iteration, we're definitely going to call them digital posters, so that they have people have more of a sense. And we'll also make sure that we actually invite people to start thinking about their digital posters earlier, so that we just get the design of that activity a little bit better. But big thank you to everyone who has shared their work in progress and their projects there. And we'll be sure to thank all of you and call attention to your work more publicly via the email newsletter, which will go out. And you will also all be sent a survey. Just again, another way for you to give us feedback and help us iterate on this event. So Open Studio projects, the quotes competition is still on. It's happening in the hallway forums, and there are some very, very funny submissions happening there. So again, there'll be some ebooks that we will give away from our sponsor, Roosevelt Media, who do all of the beautiful design books. And if you're not one of the winners for that, then don't forget that you do get 20% off using the conference code LXConf at Roosevelt Media, so you can buy your own books as well. Okay, with that, I'm gonna give it over to my good friend Amy. So Amy and I met in 2011 on what was the very first day of my job at Deakin University. It was in Hawaii. It was the very best first day on a job ever, because I was at a conference in Hawaii and I was meeting both Amy and Laura Paschini, who's a good friend of Amy and of Jess as well. So it was probably the best first day ever. And Amy was one of the keynotes there, and she talked about the work that she had been doing with Herb on the musical history videos that they did. It's a whole big series that you can find. I know that I'm not using the right title, but this is a whole big series of videos that she had created in order to create a hook for her students to introduce them to important moments in history. And they were all based on pop culture. And it's Amy singing. and Herb with the music, and it really like launched her as a creative powerhouse, which is what she still is. And so I'm just so glad that we have two such creative personalities to finish the conference off. So Amy is, as she calls it, a professional recombinant, a frequent flaneuse, and an itinerant artist. She is all over the place. I'm connected with Amy on Facebook, and you get to see all of her creativity there in full flight all the time. And after 25 years in the classroom, she is now consulting, creating, and curating in the field of creativity. And her tagline is, "The cloud is our campfire." It alludes to her passion for transparency and network knowledge and creativity. And we totally relate to that, Amy. There is a reason why our logo is a campfire as well. So we are kindred spirits. I am not wearing a fascinator today, but Amy was wearing this very fascinator when I met her in Hawaii. I am wearing my hate. So, with that, Amy, I'm going to give it over to you to get started with your presentation. I'm going to switch over to your slides. And like I said, by the way, people, 200 slides here, so get set and hang in for a wild ride. Amy, I will give it over to you, and when your time is about up, and just to give us all time for some Q&A with you, I will just sidle back into the room with my webcam. Okay, so with that, a round of applause for Amy, please, and aloha, Amy, take it away.
Thank you. Let's see, I'm not seeing the...
I'm just giving it over to you. Okay. Just a second. There you go. Okay.
There we go. Hi, folks. So this is me. You can find me everywhere as @Amy Burvall. And Joyce was right. I first started out making these crazy history music videos. I was going through cancer at the time. So this creative process of, making funny lyrics and dressing up and making these videos was very cathartic for me and really got me through a dark period. As well, YouTube was first starting out. So it was my students who said, you should put these on YouTube. And through that experience, I learned the value of sharing your creative work. And because we got so much interesting feedback and interesting things happening to us because of that experience. Since then, I've branched out into other things and even left K-12 and worked for a startup in San Francisco. And wrote curriculum for higher ed and just traveled all over, and I've worked with quite a few people, mainly with creativity and visual thinking. I've just finished a book. So this is the debut of the nuggets in our book called Intention, Critical Creativity in the Classroom. And though it's geared to K-12 teachers, it actually can be applied to anyone, to adults. I work a lot with the L&D community. So I think you'll find that this is really about personal creativity, and then what can you take away from it and apply into the workforce. I'm calling this rigorous whimsy. So there's an element in our book about rigorous whimsy, and this talk is about having a rigorous whimsy mindset. Well, what the heck is rigorous whimsy? I enjoy whimsy. I enjoy play. I enjoy serendipity. And when I looked up the word whimsy, it actually comes from Old Norse hvima, if I'm saying it right, I don't know, which means to let the eyes wander. And I'm going to be talking a lot about wondering and wandering. So I think this concept of whimsy is really valuable. Kim talked about play and the importance of play. And I pulled this quote from Maslow. I think play is extremely important no matter what age you are. It can equal frivolity, but it doesn't have to. In fact, we should value play because play, when you think about it, makes us those flexible, chameleon-like, adaptable, agile thinkers and doers and makers that we need for this crazy world. It also increases our trust in others. It makes us more tolerant and bonds us with our peers. It involves a sense of purpose and mastery. So if you've ever played a game of any sort, you'll understand that. And I think most importantly, in any work situation, it makes us more open to change and makes us creative thinkers, makes us apply our creativity to innovation. So play is essential. Our book is based on a concept we call critical creativity, which is not only about creativity being critical and essential, but also about the critical thinking that goes along with creativity, especially when you articulate your reasoning, your creative reasoning behind your choices. So we define it as this. But if you take away the word student, it could be anyone using your creative expression to demonstrate how you understand in a deep way the nuances of something, whatever that might be. My co-author is named Dan Ryder, and he goes by Wicked Descent, very worth following on Twitter. And his quote, I just love it: "If they build it, they will get it." And this rings true for me quite a bit after having 24 years in the classroom, that creation can reveal comprehension. I love this quote by E.E. Cummings because I do think we are kind of a mashup of what we read, what we expose ourselves to, our mentors, our teachers, the movies we watch, our parents even. But the moment we actually experience something, this is experiential learning, this is getting Da Vinci on it, I guess. The moment we can feel it, it really internalizes that learning. I think that's so important. And creativity is much more about making, right? It's also about observing things, being full of wonder, interpreting things, questioning the status quo, and exploring other people's perspectives. And I think the most important thing about creativity is those bits in the middle there, finding patterns and making connections. And so this talk, I'll go a little bit into what I believe creativity is about and how it works. And then the second half are tips, and we call it crushing it with creativity. I went to MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco recently, and I just was fascinated by this sort of interactive experience that they give you. You can hear a dream that inspired this painting. And this is what our book is about. It's about the backstory of the creative thing that you've produced, right? What is the backstory? And tell us about that. Van Gogh's quote about looking at things for a long time, and that will give you the deeper meaning, really applies here. So let's get to how does creativity work? Well, what the heck is it first, right? And how does it work? So we've created this credo of 7 points, and I'm going to try to explain them as best as I can. So the first one, of course, is that creativity is a birthright. It's not that some people are born creative and others aren't. Some people are born more talented than others in certain areas, but creativity is not about talent. We all have this sort of force in us, but it does take some practice and some training. And you can actually train yourself through creative exercises, through environments and people that are conducive to creativity, to be more creative. And we write a lot about that, and I'll hopefully share some details. But in the links that I gave you are quite a few resources as well. Now, I love Henry Jenkins' work on participatory culture, and I think this is really important to know that creativity has been democratized in a way that everyone has the means to really high value production, quality, creative expression, and the networks to distribute these widely. That's one of the things I found with my YouTube videos, is that we reached people from all over the world. And it just floored me at the time. This is reminding you that this is when YouTube first started out, but I couldn't believe the different audiences that I would get. And to me, it's kind of like if you touch one person with your work, it's worth it, but exponential growth when it comes to artistic distribution by the average Joe, right? Creativity is a Dao. So Dao means the way. And I really love this because it is a way of thinking and being and doing. It's a way of operating, as John Cleese would say. It's curiosity for its own sake. This is actually supposed to be an animated GIF, but I know they don't work on this thing, but it's really cool because his little lights go up. So it's really noticing things that other people don't, like this guy, or this guy. I love street art like this, right? This is one of my favorite ones. It's a great exercise to do with people in a workshop, by the way. But this concept of stuffing your eyes with wonder. People hate walking with me around a city because I stop for every 2 seconds and take a picture of like rust or something. And I think it's really great. I love this quote by Michelangelo. I use it for a variety of things, but in this case, it's that seeing something that doesn't exist, but he knows it's there and he just needs to hack away and uncover it. I love this. And this concept of beginner's mind, of freeing yourself from assumptions and establishing sort of an insightful ignorance. So Stuart Firestein works at Columbia, and he says this is the essence of being a good scientist, is having insightful ignorance. So I want to share 2 stories from my daughter. She's 12, Guinevere. And we were out with pizza, having pizza, and the bill came. And I'm like, well, who's paying? And I look at my husband and whatever. And she says, I'll pay. And she whips out her phone and she's found money on the phone and she puts it down. I just thought, like, that is a different way to think about it, right? And the same was, we were in the car. And don't tell anyone, but I was texting, which is like really bad. And I said, oh, I hope the policeman doesn't see me, knock on wood. And she said, okay, I'm looking around the car. She can't find any wood in the car. She knows kind of what knock on wood means, but not really. And she whips out this piece of paper from her school bag. I'm reading your comment, Joyce, and it says bad. So, and she crumbles it up and she knocks on it. And she says, see, paper used to be wood. Wood used to, yeah, exactly, right? And so she's thinking of it as a child maybe, but in a different perspective. She's seeing these things that, yes, I know paper used to be wood, but I would never consider that. So it's this freeing your mind from assumptions. Now, when it's true, it's divergent thinking. When people ask me my definition of creativity, I say it's about connecting dots. And I'm not the first person to say this. Steve Jobs famously said it, but a lot of other people have as well. And I think it's about connecting disparate dots, finding relationships where, I don't know, you might not expect them, juxtaposing these relationships. And maybe other people don't understand these connections. But the point is, you have to have the dots. So the dots are all our bits of knowledge and all the things we've collected and curated and been exposed to. And that's where teachers really come in handy, because we help students grow their dot forest so that they can connect them. And here's an example. I was once watching Tom York of Radiohead do this is Lotus Flower, I think. And I'm like, oh my God, it's Egon Schiele. Ah! And I would never have made this connection with his particular hand movements and body movements to Egon Schiele's work if I hadn't had the best art teacher in the world, that exposed me to Egon Schiele. So I have to have this wide range of experiences and knowledge in order to be creative, to connect the dots. And this is why I think inquiry-based learning, although it's so sticky and wonderful, needs to be combined with direct instruction as well. We can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. Creativity is lineage, and what this is about is remix. All creativity is derivative. I am not one to say that creativity means being something unique and completely novel. I think anything completely novel has a history, has a backstory, and that's all about remix. I often use the alphabet as sort of an example of how we remix things all the time to make new things. And when people ask me about remix, because I am a remixer myself, I say it's about copying, yes, but it's about transforming, and this is the key to it. How transformational can you be? And then creating something new. I don't know what's happening. Oh, there, combining into something new. I think that like a jazz player or like a skateboarder, when you transform something that exists and give it into something else and give it new meaning, I think that might be the ultimate demonstration of learning, because you're not just regurgitating something, you're using your knowledge to create something novel in your own perspective. And I think of skateboarders because they learn tricks. They watch in a social situation of learning. They watch others, they copy them, they practice. It's a little bit autodidactic because they're kind of doing it on their own. No one's forcing them. And then they riff on it and they make their own trick or their own spin on a trick. And that's, I think, the essence of learning. People ask me, what's the difference between remix and mashup? And I have to turn to alcohol as an analogy. So, and I really think this, if you've ever had a Long Island iced tea, it's just all mixed up. You know that there's a lot of different ingredients in there, but it's created this brand new thing. They've been deconstructed and recontextualized. Whereas a mashup, you still see the layers like a White Russian. You still see these distinctions. And I'll show you some examples later on in the deck, but it's more of a blended thing. Here's an example of a mashup. It's some genius decided that Kim Kardashian was like a great thing because it's like Kierkegaard and Kardashian. So they just mix up her wisdom, haha, and his into these tweets. Really funny. And I've been working with collage lately because I discovered a new app called Enlight. So I've been playing with Bardart, which is mixing Bardot with famous works of art to give them new meaning and just be humorous, really. The app is called Enlight, and I have it actually written down here. Yeah, here's the app. And so when you do collage, it's a little Dadaist, sometimes could be surrealist, but it gives a kind of a new meaning and often a political statement. So this is kind of my feeling about technology. Barbarella was like all futuristic, and then this is what happens to our futuristic tools, really. The America has been, obsessed with walls lately. So I did a series where I took all kinds of famous walls, and then I called it Wall Dolls because I mixed with kind of innocuous girls from the 60s kind of thing. Or I did a mushroom moments series with oblivious people looking, hither and thither, but yet, craziness is happening in the world. And that was sort of a series that I did with mushroom clouds. So this is all reminiscent of William Burroughs, who is famous for cut-up method. And we mentioned Bowie. Kim kind of paid homage to Bowie. Bowie used the cut-up method quite a bit, where he cut up different things to piece together lyrics. Kurt Cobain actually would write himself love letters to others that he never sent, and then he would cut those up and remix the words into lyrics. I did a kind of an example with makeout poetry, I called it, which just happened serendipitously. I saw that when I took a photo of my iPad glowing, it kind of came out cool. So what could I do with it? So I paid my daughter to cut up magazine words. And this was very cathartic because I was in a writer's block, and I used this kind of throughout my writer's block. I would do a couple poems here and there. I ended up doing about 400 of these. And recently in a workshop, I did human magnetic poetry. So everybody had a card and they wrote a word, and they kind of had to find each other and make a poem line. It was really fun. I highly recommend that for any party or meeting. It was really a cool exercise. But if you haven't read Austin Kleon's Steal Like an Artist, he makes so many points about the difference between rip-off and remix, and how you need to, when you appropriate, you need to attribute. And when you appropriate, you need to steal from many rather than stealing from one. I think makerspaces should also have remix labs and deconstruction zones so that you can piece together different parts of things and make new things. That's how I would do it. And one way to do that with ideas is to use the scamper technique, which is quite common. There's a great game out there called Disruptus. I should put it in the links. But Disruptus is a card game that has the players doing all these things. So like, if you take a part of this thing and a part of this thing and mix them up, what could it be? Or if you could add one thing to make this better, what could it be? It's a really great way to get your mind more agile. Creativity thrives on context. And what I mean about this is that we need to have environments, physical and psychological, that are conducive to creativity. And how do we do that? Well, part of it involves the time. Part of it involves trust. In fact, I think a big part of it involves trusting other people in your environment. And then tools. And something I came up with from my theater background, I guess, is this concept of mise en scène, of having an experience design. And I think Joyce talks about this a lot, to offer resources, but also offering sort of a design of an environment that can be a muse, and then get out of the way, like Hitchcock did in his cameos of his films. I also think we can leave it a little more open. So one of the things I came across in Wired magazine was this, and I thought, wow, wouldn't that be great for curriculum if we just had people to know, hottest ideas, must follow feeds, and essential works? And that's the anchor that we studied, and that would be actually good at a conference as well. And then, of course, getting the heck outside. You know, I live in Hawaii, and one of the things I noticed was that all my kids had smartphones. I worked in a pretty privileged school, but we tend to have these multimedia studios in our pockets. And why are we sitting indoors? So this is a lot like the metal paint tube that freed the Impressionist artists from the studio and allowed them to get outside and take their paints outside and capture the light en plein air. And that revolutionized art completely. I wrote a couple blog posts about that if you'd like to read them in the links. But I'm a big fan of analog and sketching, obviously. So I think mobile learning should also include sketchbooks and pens, and we should be in tune with our environment and going out in the field and sketching. There's also a thing called what I call the art studio vibe, which it happens digitally as well. But when you're working creatively in a space with other people, even if you're not working on the same thing, but you're working synchronously or connecting with each other, you get better at your creativity. You get feedback fuel or whatever. And I think that's really important to remember, to connect with other creative people. This is one of the big parts of our books is that creativity craves constraints. In fact, most of our book is offering up prompts and constraints for activities that you can do with your students. But the feeling that creativity is about freedom is actually inaccurate. Creativity really works well if you have some shackles, if you have some constraints. Often it's making something more simplistic, distilling it, essentializing it. Like David Ogilvy is one of the original Mad Men, talking about simplistic ideas. I love this minimalist posters to depict a concept. I would do this with anything really, as an exercise. I try this. I call it Mondrianify, because it's like Mondrian with his geometric shapes and very basic colors. But how do you depict something in the most essential way possible with basic shapes? I did a little project for myself that was more of a reflection, and I said, well, if I could distill my day into one word, what would it be? And then I tried to practice metaphorical typography, which is when you get the typography to actually look like what you're talking about. So here's a day I was tense. I did a whole calendar, like a year worth of it, and then I abandoned the project. But it's a really great idea, I think. Or even something like I tested myself when Bowie died. I actually was thinking Bowie, bow, and a bow and an E. And then I did an entire alphabet playing with the constraint of the letter and the plays on words that you could make, like embark and why not. One of my favorite games is called Line and Carrot. Well, I'm calling it that. And I try to take a word and change it as drastically as possible with as few changes as possible, either by adding letters or taking them away. So you can see here an example. Sometimes I call it less and more because it's like less longing and more belonging kind of thing. So you might find that on Twitter. Nick Susanis, who wrote an amazing PhD thesis as a graphic novel called Unflattening. I highly recommend it. It's all about visual thinking. It created this exercise, your day or your unit of study or anything really, into a series of grids and gestures. I'll show you some more examples later. And finally, I think creativity is the skill of the century. Don't get too excited. It's finally only just for the credo. I'm going to give you the tips. But I do think it's the skill of the century because we live in this crazy, unpredictable world, and we need to be agile thinkers. We need to learn how the world works, why the world wags, and what wags it, as Merlin said. It's very scary and very unpredictable, and I think the most important thing to do is cultivate creative thinking in both ourselves and our students so that they will be flexible. Because if they can see things out of whack, they can see how they can be in whack. And I found this recently. I just absolutely love this kid who took it literally about alphabetic order, but amazing. So now I will switch to the part where I'm going to give you some tips, and we call it crushing it with creativity. Hope I'm not going too fast, but I'm trying to get everything in here. So the first is find the wow in the now. And this is about how our world is becoming more automated. We need to cling on to those human things like curiosity and wonder and poignancy and beauty. And that's what we should be cultivating to get that human edge. When Steve Jobs died, apparently he said, "Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow." And I like that. I'd love to think that that's the last thing he said, because it's this constant sort of wonderlust rather than wanderlust. I love this. Bill Moyer's piercing the mundane to find the marvelous. One person who does that really well is Miranda Keeling on Twitter. If you've ever followed her, she's from England, and she makes these just beautiful observations of everyday things, but they're so poetic. In fact, some people actually draw them. This is a photo I took, which seemed to shout at me, just take a minute and look. But look at what people do with mundane objects. I mean, this is really fascinating. You can follow this guy on Instagram if you like, but it's a concept of playing with your environment, of seeing patterns that aren't normally there. This is the chords. Isn't that great? You can do this at a conference or a meeting. It's really funny to see what people have in their bags. Wabi sabi, if you're not familiar with it, it's the Japanese aesthetic of finding beauty in the broken, kind of the power in the flaws. And this is a picture I took in Mexico of its old stucco and things, but I just find it to be so beautiful. The second is to be quizzical and questioning, to not accept things as status quo. And this is my daughter, Guinevere. She was getting out of the car one day to go to school, and I said, "Do you love school?" And she says, "Yes, but I have the answers to the questions they never ask." Oops, I'm going to check my sound because some people say I'm breaking up. So I'm going to just check this, just see if this is okay. Is this better? I have the answers to the questions.
Amy, sorry, I'm just going to butt in. I don't think it's the sound necessarily. The sound is quite good, but I think maybe your webcam is just hogging a little bit of bandwidth. So I'm going to turn off your camera, and then maybe you can turn it back on again at the end for the Q&A.
That's perfect. Yeah. Nobody needs to see me.
I'm calling it the Fab Cam now because of the two of you, but yeah. Oh, actually, it looks like I haven't got control to do that, so you may have to turn your camera off.
Okay, I'm going to turn it off. Mm-hmm. Okay, stop sharing. Yay. Okay, we're back. So I will, thank you, Carrie. I'll be back later. But anyway, so this got me thinking about wonder walls and why we stop having wonder. She actually said, we don't have wonder walls anymore. Wonder's done. And I'm like, no. So I think even in a corporate setting, I think having a wonder wall would be a really great thing. Maybe it's not going to be these really esoteric wonders, but could just be interesting questions that people have and can address. And this concept of holding ideas askew and really looking at different perspectives and staying in the question and not being afraid to stay in the question. Keats called this negative capability, this ability to embrace uncertainty, to live in the why not and the why. One way you can extend people's thinking or help them to extend their own thinking is to just ask what if, or what are some other perspectives, or what could you do to fix that, to design that, to develop that, and then of course how they feel or think about it. I don't know if anyone has a kid, but when you pick up your kid from school and then they're like, you don't know what they studied, and you ask them, well, what did you learn? And they said nothing, and you get frustrated. I came up with this idea, well, what was weird, what was wonderful, and what was worrisome? Again, this is a creative constraint, but I think this would be a really great thing to have in an office setting or in a classroom or even in a digital space. To value the visceral. This is about going with your gut and working with the environment. Sorry, I skipped over this lovely lady going with her gut feeling. Intuition is really an important part of creativity. And also that kind of gut feeling when you see something and maybe nobody else sees it. So this is Donald Taylor's picture of some building in England. And of course, I saw this guy in a pith helmet. When I went to the museum, I just couldn't help seeing things and recontextualizing the artwork with my paper by 53 drawing app. Here you go, roaming. And this is really important for me, de-siloing thing. We tend to stick things in silos and we forget about interdisciplinary study and to make disciplines dance together. Michelangelo said something about you can't be an architect unless you can paint a nude, basically. And Einstein calls this the essence of intelligence, combinatorial play. Combinatorial play is really fun if you do something called blind dates and you get together with somebody outside of your discipline or outside of your department and you combine something so that you can create a unit together or a project together. You're coming from totally different perspectives. It's really great. Also to think about connection maps. What if we ask students to connect not only within the course, what am I learning now that connects with something I learned previously, but to other courses or life or even the outside world. I often think of it as like a concept album. What if you teach thematically? If you teach thematically, kids tend to, or anybody really tends to internalize things better. Now, Meraki, if anyone is Greek, I hope I'm not pronouncing it wrong, but it's a Greek word that means to love what you do, what you make, and put your heart and soul into what you create. And I love this picture of Henri Matisse when he was bedridden, really still going for it. But I love the word poignant because poignant actually comes from to prick. And I think as humans, we want to make things that maybe aren't necessarily beautiful, but they move other people, they prick at them. And I think this is part of Meraki, and Harvard researchers call it the IKEA effect, or IKEA, whatever you want to say. But it's that, you know, if you ever put anything together with IKEA and you're like, huna muna huna, and you put it together and you feel really proud of yourself, that is the IKEA effect. It's kind of echoing in the 50s when they invented cake mix. And it wasn't selling well until they said you can put an egg in it. As soon as they said add an egg, you felt all confident that you've actually made something. Haha. And so we learn from making. We learn all these other things besides just the joy of making. If you've ever made anything, you know. Mastering the metaphor is another huge thing for me about metaphorical thinking, I think is a big part of creativity. And it's a way to sort of understand things, but also to communicate them, especially abstract things. I collect metaphors. I go metaphor hunting. This is a picture I've taken that, you know, I throw out sometimes at a slide deck, like, what is this a metaphor for? Or could this be a metaphor for learning? If so, how? And I did a project. I put the link on there. You can see all my metaphorical pictures, but Ceci n'est pas une métaphore. So it's kind of a play on the Ceci n'est pas une pipe. And of course they are metaphors, so duh. But I tend to throw this out there for people. Like, is this a weed or a wish? And it's a really great thing to play in a team. And in our book, we call it a magiphor, to identify a metaphor related to whatever you're talking about. So in this case, education. And get people to talk about it. A fun way is to exchange your camera roll. I mean, if you're really a risk taker, you can exchange your phones and look at each other's camera roll to get this sort of serendipitous array of pictures to choose from. I invented something called Serendipidoodle, which is using a generator. It's a bot, and it gives you a combination of an adjective and a noun. And the goal is to create a drawing based on whatever you get that's as metaphorical as possible. So this person really got metaphorical with informational corset. You can probably understand why. And this sensory coma, this was from a workshop I did at Mozilla. Really cool. Clocking your creativity. Now, people think that creativity is sort of like you have to wait for the muse to come, or it comes in waves, and it does for me often. But I tend to have a daily diet of creativity. I tend to have a schedule. I get on a kick and then I take, 10 minutes a day to work on one thing. And it's important to have these low barrier entry points. A lot of people love DS-106 because it does just that. They have a daily create. You can create with others online. It's important, I think, to always expose yourself and curate, because you're constantly being kind of bombarded with media that you can use later. So having a place for all your curation, and expose yourself to a variety of things. Like, I go to museums all the time, but Quentin Tarantino, who never went to film school, went to films. That's how he learned. So really adapting this Picasso quote about, washing the dust away from the soul of, the dust away from everyday life. It's important to have time and space. And I call this white space, which is sort of nicked from the graphic design world. But when we do mundane things like swim or walk or take a shower is often when the big ideas hit. But we have to have a place to put them down. If you've ever had a big idea and then forgotten it, that's really awful. So have a notebook. And I think a notebook is kind of like a net for butterflies, which are ideas. My creativity journal has sparks, and which are just ideas that aren't fleshed out yet, and my irons in the fire, and things I've put on the back burner, but I'm going to go back to later. Things I've abandoned, which are my ashes. And the campfire, as Joyce alluded to, is things I'm working with others. It's a more collaborative thing, or I'm sharing it online. And this is Druid wisdom here. Miss your mark so you can find your target. And this is about getting over that hump of feeling like you have to be perfect. So be more punk, be more Sex Pistols. Malcolm McLaren said, fail flamboyantly. It's really difficult to do. And Sylvia Plath even admitted it's the worst enemy of creativity, is this self-doubt. But sometimes mistakes are really beautiful. Like, here's two that popped up on my camera without me knowing. I won't say what kind of drinks I was having, but no, they're probably just a mistake, but they're quite beautiful and impressionistic. And when you have this sort of blank canvas staring at you in the face and it's very scary, Van Gogh said, just slap something on it. Don't think about it too much. And when you are creating, you don't have time for hating. So people that are hating on your work, they aren't creating. They're not creating. They could spend that energy creating. So don't worry about other people or what they think. Just make more stuff. That's what Andy Warhol said. And finally, to wrap it up, thinking beyond your shtick. Joyce introduced me as this, starting out with these videos, and as a high school teacher. Well, now I've moved on to different things, and I try different things all the time, but always trying to keep true to what I love and what I want to do. And sometimes I need a community to help me out. And thanks, I am going to keep going. I'm just going to wrap this up a little bit, but these are some ideas to make your community more conducive to creativity. So in our book, we kind of reference the punk culture and this DIY, sort of the fanzine, do-it-yourself, piece together things, bricolage, work with what you have. And oops, I just got here. So it's more about the process rather than the product, and it's more about reflecting on your work rather than who reacts to it and what they say. And it's more about the design process, right? Looking at empathy and need finding and reflecting, and then getting that feedback and iterating. I love having other people to work with or bounce things off with. So get that mosh pit of minds going, get that collaborative thing happening. It's that water cooler effect of looking at other people from different disciplines, really. I'm almost done, Joyce. I just want to share a little bit about assessment, because people always ask me about how do you grade creativity. But this is a Welsh slate. This is like a portfolio. They have to, if you're a person that's involved in Welsh slate carving, you have to do this. And you have to create the different thicknesses. But I was thinking that, why don't you have students discuss the process and their influences and their creative reasoning? What if they just discuss their process and pondering after they've proposed something? That could be like the project specs. What if at the end they had to come up with a lesson that you would teach next year? What if they could tag using affective data analysis? What if they could tag things with emoji for each assignment to see how they felt about it? What if they use something I call mind peaks? Whose mind did they peek into? And then how did that give them a mind peak, a high point in their thinking as an exit ticket? And I talked about Nick Susanis and his grids and gestures thing. This is a really cool way to reflect. And I've done a lot of vlogging, so I like this 5x5, like your 5 big takeaways from this course or whatever in a film or a vlog or an annotated image. And then finally, I thought, well, if our goal is to demonstrate learning and knowledge and perhaps leave a legacy, what if there were no rubrics? We just had universal specs that were, things were beautiful, unique, poignant, relevant, and transparent, which spells burped. And something I've used successfully for peer feedback instead of critiquing someone else is to say what you love and then offer a what if, because it gets you thinking creatively as well. So remember, and these are just some like inspirational things, there is no win, there is no fail, there's only make. Where to find Rigorous Whimsy? Well, my book is coming out soon in June, and in it we talk about creating with words, sounds, images, stuff like Oreos, the body, and others, as well as social media. And finally, just a few great quotes that I live by. Make something good every day. And this is about legacy from Andy Warhol. And I love this one. Don't care about what other people think. Help those along who've helped you. And finally, treasure those people and paint what you like and die happy, which has become my personal motto. It's by Henry Miller. I use it for everything. Paint what you like and die happy. Thank you so much for your attention. And I'm just a few minutes over, so that's hopefully okay. But now I'm ready for questions. Should I turn back on my camera? I'm turning back on my camera. Let's see.
Yes, Amy. Thank you. Please turn on the fab cam.
I don't know how fab it is, but yeah.
Oh, wow. That was just amazing. Just so many ideas. And yeah, exactly. Visually exploding, mind exploding with ideas. Wendy and I had just had an open studio discussion about how do we do this online? How do we create this opportunity for serendipity and creativity online? People sharing ideas colliding. How do we do this? And then you come along and you go, well, it can happen this way, that way, that way. It's just fantastic. Thank you so much. It's just great. And I know I speak for everyone else when I say that I'm going to be digging through your slides for many weeks to come to be inspired, and obviously also in the book once we get access to it. So fantastic, Amy. It's just absolutely lovely. Jacqueline, the book, Mark will there. Mark's put it in the link. There's a Google Doc there that Amy has provided with links to all of the resources. Well, not all, because there were literally hundreds, but places that for you to go and follow up, including
link to the rabbit hole.
including the name of the book. So I'm gonna ask people to just use the raise hand function on the left hand side of the participant list. So if you click on the little face, then you should be able to raise your hand. So if you've got a microphone, you'll be able to ask your question directly to Amy. And if you haven't, then you can just pop it into the chat room. So and I'll just make sure that I do monitor that. So we've got 2 questions. We've got one from Carrie J. Carrie J, do you want to use your microphone?
Hi, Amy. I was just wondering if you've written any other books on creativity in general, because I don't teach K through 12. I teach at the higher ed sector, and while I see some value in what you have, and I definitely am going to look to implement it. Also, as someone who wants to get out there and do more creative things for my own self and my own soul expression, I would dearly love to know if you've written anything in that vein.
Yes, in the links, I write quite a bit on my blog actually, and there's a really good post I think called Unlearning finding the forest or something like that. But it's all based on Star Wars animated GIFs, but it's about creativity. But I have the link to all my posts that relate to creativity. And actually the book, even though it says K through 12, it's actually kind of adaptable to adults and higher ed. I have extensive experience in higher ed and working with adults in adult learning. So I kind of wanted to write something that was flexible. So the first 3 chapters kind of go through like the essence of creativity and how it works. And then the last part of the book is all the activities, but you could adapt them. But check out my blog first, I think would be the good place to start. And I've put all the links there in the doc.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much, because I've been going through the writer's block from hell. So this was
actually not true.
Session.
I know that Carrie writes all the time, but thanks, Carrie. That's great. So I see that we've got Karen with a question, Tamara with a question, and also a question from Wendy in the chat. So I would love to get to all of them. So let's see whether we can get through that. I'll give it over to Tamara first. Tamara, you've got your hand raised, but not your microphone on. Do you want to just drop it in? So Tamara, just for the purpose of the recording, she says, I love that you shared for K through 12 application and would like to view your process from another angle. When creating for clients or users, how do you balance creativity and experimentation with expectations?
So I think the most important part, I mentioned trust in any kind of situation. And I think getting people to be free in so setting up a system that space is a muse, whether it be a digital space or I'm working at a workshop or whatever, but having this sort of making people at ease and trusting each other and getting people to just play and feel okay with play, I think is really important. And then what I've noticed is they start thinking like, oh, it's okay if I mess up or I have a kooky idea or whatever. So it's really like a social function first, like really getting to know people. And so I do a lot of like openers, where we are working with each other and we're, kind of icebreakers. I hate to call them icebreakers, but it's low barrier entry points. So that everybody feels successful kind of thing. And I think it kind of opens it up and just setting the expectations there. And then, because a lot of people, you're right, like they don't feel like they're creative because they associate creativity with art. And then they feel like, oh my God, I'm not artistic, or I've never done anything creative. But once they understand that creativity is so much more than just the arts, they realize, wow, I actually, I'm a cook, or, I created an interesting business solution for my company. And then they realize that they are creative. I hope that answers that. I'm not sure if that did or not, but
yeah, I think it's one of the things about just consulting with people in generative creative projects like that can be that people want you to tell. If people are super outcomes focused and they want the outcomes up front, that's really difficult. And I've in the past, for projects that I've done, have broken it up and said, look, let's go through this piece of work first, and it'll be like some sort of exploratory activity. And then let's assess whether you actually want to work with us for the next piece of work, or whether you're happy with what came out. Because after we go through that exploration, we'll know better what it is that you actually need to see. You don't want to preempt the creative process. So,
yeah,
all right.
The reason why we call it rigorous whimsy is because it is whimsy with a purpose. Like, so all of the things should be in our book, for example, related to the content, or so if it was with adults, it's related to whatever you're dealing with. If it's a problem or you're trying to figure out something. So I think it's that application of it, not just whimsy for whimsy's sake kind of thing.
Yeah. I just got Wendy and then Karen. I think Wendy, you've got your microphone on, Wendy, if you just want to jump on.
Thank you. I'd just like to say a synchronous thank you to Amy, because I've been following her on Twitter and it's been very inspirational, particularly with paper 53. But my question relates to curation. Yeah. And obviously you're a person that has high volume output as well as high volume collecting of interesting dots. So I'm just wondering, is there a favourite place for you to curate, or do you think is there different ways to curate different stuff?
Yeah, I've gone through so many waves, but I tell you my 2 go-to favorites right now. My go-to favorite, and you'll see them all, are the G+ communities. And I know everyone laughs because no one used G+ communities, but I use them at workshops because they're really easy to use, and you can front load with all these resources, and you can have people participate, and you can take pictures right there. So whenever I find something interesting on the internet that I know I want to keep, I used to use Digo and all that, but I actually put them, I need to have a space for them. So I've created these communities. So wow, that's about remix. I'll put it in my remix community under this category. Or that's visual thinking and it's about metaphor. I'll put it there. So it's set up almost like a website with different categories. And as long as I have a place for everything, and as long as Google still keeps it working, I'm going to die if it doesn't. That's where a lot of my stuff is, because then people can share as well. And I'm not just doing the sole curation. Other people are putting things in there.
Yeah,
the other thing I find, oh, sorry,
I got
go ahead.
burned with, I was going to say, I got burned when Delicious nearly died. It then got taken over, but it never really got the support that it needed. And I tried several other places, but now I use paid service like Evernote, because I don't ever want to be in the, oh my God, they're not turning it off, are they?
And I tell you, one thing I do with Paper 53 is because you can take a screenshot and you can draw over an image. When I read something online on my phone, which is increasing now, that's what I use. I take a screenshot of it and I highlight what I want with pink, and I keep it in a special folder in Paper 53, which is backed up all the time. So that's where I do a lot of my curation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a cat? Do I hear a cat?
It is a cat. I'm just going to let her out. Sorry, everyone.
I thought my cat would bug us. Okay, I'm gonna look at who was it? What other was it? Tamara? No. Who? I can't see the other question.
Yes. Sorry, there was another
Karen.
Yes,
Karen,
I had a
Elsa.
question. Okay, thank you, Amy. That was absolutely amazing. I just had a question around the fact that some corporations that we work with our students can be very, can give us really boring briefs, and they're not at that level of wanting creativity. Do you think it's just a space that we need to get people used to playing in that area, or do you think there are some projects where it is just boring stuff and we need to work on that, or can you combine the two?
I think you should always try to combine the two. And that's, I think it's a dire need. As I said in the beginning, I think being able to think creatively, and, working with high school students in the past, like older ones, they had been just so accustomed to just, okay, what do I need to do to get this? And, is this the right answer or not the right answer, and blah, blah, blah. And they weren't comfortable in the question, that sort of negative capability. They weren't comfortable in that space. They weren't comfortable exploring other perspectives other than what they consider the right one. So all these things are kind of what's gotten us into the mess we are now in the world. And I think we need to do it as much as possible, even if it's just creative strategies, thinking strategies, beginning of, say, a class, or remixing existing projects, maybe combining one person's idea with another person's idea and seeing how they can create something new. But this kind of concept of remix and play, I think, needs to be desperately infused with everything, because it's what makes independent thinkers and agile thinkers, and that's what we want.
All right.
Okay.
Now we are just coming up to the top of the hour. So I should be wrapping it up. If anyone else has got a very quick question for Amy, then I'm happy to take it. No, I know. So Amy's been great. She's been in the forums, and she's been chatting on Twitter. So you can continue asking her. Like I said, I know I'll be digging through her thoughts and really listening to this recording over the next few weeks. So with that, I just want to say, oh, and by the way, Amy, I just want to say, I know that I have like creativity muscles, but between you and Kim, you have totally, I know both of you personally, and I know that you both are creative all the time and are crafting and generative all the time. And you've both convinced me that I need to be practicing my creative muscles all the time, much more, and not expecting it to leap into action when I actually need it. So I will be making a daily diet of creativity and a daily habit of creativity. So thank you so much for that inspiration. With that, please, everyone, give Amy a big virtual applause, as we have been doing for this last big idea session.
Thanks, guys. I really enjoyed it. I loved being here. Thanks. Enjoy the link.
Just great. I will just with that just round off and just recap for everyone what's going to happen next. So this was our last big idea session. We will continue working asynchronously. We know there are people who were sleeping while this session was happening, so people will be catching up with it over the next 24 hours. And so we are running a debrief and a little closing session, kind of to cap off the conference tomorrow. The link will be in the schedule, and Mahabali and Wendy are setting up a virtually connecting, V-connecting session information, and we will also add to the schedule. We'll be following up with you with the newsletters. All of the resources and recordings will be up, and we will also be asking for your feedback on, we've loved the event. We've loved all the new connections we've made. We've loved the fact that everyone has taken a risk in coming to an unknown event and joining us for it. And thank you so much to everyone for giving us the opportunity to try all this out. And to me, it's been successful, and that's certainly the initial feedback that we're getting from people. So thank you all for taking the risk with myself, Mark, and Spiros from Academic Tribe. And we will be in touch with all of you and to see how we can continue to support this emerging LX community. So thanks everyone so much. Videos and everything will be online and remain online and accessible to you, and we will be in touch with you to build this community further. So thanks everyone, and we will see you online and connect hopefully soon again. Thank you. Thanks, Amy.
Aloha.
Aloha.